in my head that we were starting at 5:30, not 5:15, so I apologize that we're a tad late. And for those of you joining us online, thank you for being with us. And again, my apologies for the lateness of the start. So we're opening the meeting now, and I'm asking that if you have a cell phone or electronic device, that you please set it to silent. And also to let you know that any comments made here are both video and audio recorded, and they shall form part of the public record as retained in our retention bylaw. So I'm going to ask first for council to approve the agenda as printed, and that's Councillor Nicol and Councillor Van Berkel. Is there any other items, agenda repair, that's required tonight? Thank you very much. All in favor of the agenda? Thank you. Any disclosures of interest? Seeing none, we'll go to item 4.1, which is the consideration of resolution to hold a closed session meeting. So the items that we're holding the closed session meeting are printed on the agenda for full disclosure, and that was moved by Councillor Payne and seconded by Deputy Mayor Davidson. All those in favor? And that's carried. And so now we'll move into closed session. And for those, if there's anybody watching, 4 items, so I'm going to guess probably we're back here just before 7. So if you are watching, chances are we'll be back here by about 5 to 7. And look forward to welcoming you back then. Thank you. concerns a proposed amendment to the town's zoning bylaw 080-13 in accordance with Section 34 of the Planning Act. The property is known as 5765 County Road 27 in the town of Innisfil. We'll now hear from the clerk on how the public meeting notice, how the public notice of this meeting was provided. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of this public meeting was circulated to all agencies and stakeholders on May 30th, 2019, and notice was also posted on the town's website on June 5th, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Was any correspondence been received by the Clerk's Department concerning the proposed amendments?
No correspondence has been received on this item.
Thank you. We will now hear from Mr. Stephen Montgomery, Senior Planner, who will provide a summary of the planning context of the application. While Mr. Montgomery is getting ready, I'll just take a moment to ask anybody here who has an electronic device, a phone or whatever, if it's on silent or mute, and also to let you all know that comments made tonight are both audio and video recorded. We're live streaming our meetings, and we will be also keeping we'll be keeping your comments in accordance with our the retention bylaw that the town has. So I just want to let you all know that. And Mr. Montgomery, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public, the purpose of this public meeting is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application for the subject lands, which are located north of Cookstown with frontage on the east side of County Road 27 at the northeast intersection of the second line and County Road 27. The owner submitted a zoning bylaw amendment application to return the lands to the original zoning that they had in 2017, which was agricultural general or AG zone. The lands are currently zoned residential rural and agricultural general exception zone, as the original intent of the applicant was to sever the dwelling from the balance of the farmland and consolidate the balance of the farmland with the property to the north, which is a requirement of the province and also the town and county official plans. Severances to create new residential lots in prime agricultural areas are not permitted, except in the case where farmland is being consolidated to create a larger farm. The 2016 aerial photo above shows the location of the subject lands in context. They are approximately 40.3 hectares in area. They're occupied by a barn, cash crop farmland, and a single attached dwelling with about 648 meters of frontage on County Road 27. They front onto both the second line and the County Road 27. They are surrounded by agricultural land, single attached dwellings, as well as a cemetery and an RV business to the west. So in terms of the background in this application, as stated, the applicant applied to rezone the lands from agricultural general to residential rural and agricultural general exception, or AG 30 in 2017, to facilitate the severance of the existing dwelling from the balance of the farmland, rezoning the balance of the farmland to prohibit a new dwelling under the AG 30 zone and to merge the farm with the neighboring property to the north, which is 5893 County Road 27. After this, the applicant made an application to sever the dwelling onto an approximately half-hectare lot, but the conditions lapsed. The owner no longer wishes to sever the dwelling. There's an offer of purchase and sale for the property, and the purchaser wants the AG zone restored on the entire property. So again, the purpose of this application, to restore the original AG zone. The AG zone would permit the buyer to construct an accessory second dwelling unit on the subject lands, subject to the accessory second dwelling requirements. For example, the floor area of the dwelling can be a maximum 100 meters squared. There could be a maximum of 3 bedrooms. The second dwelling cannot be severed from the lot of the principal dwelling. The maximum height is 5 meters. Parking requirements must be met, and other requirements for accessory second dwelling units under the town zoning bylaw. As previously stated, the current AG 30 zone, which is the majority of the lands, prohibits a second dwelling, which again was a requirement of the province to sever the dwelling and to merge the farm parcel. So when considering planning applications, town staff have to consider the Innisfil strategic plan, provincial plans, county and town policies. So I'll just briefly go over these. Of course, the Innisfil strategic plan speaks to the importance of promoting economic development, including support for agriculture and agribusiness as a key element of the economy, and reverting the zoning exclusively to AG would support this goal. The provincial policy statement also seeks to preserve agricultural uses, agricultural-related uses, and on-farm diversified uses in prime agricultural areas. The growth plan states that one of its guiding principles is to support and enhance the long-term viability and productivity of agriculture by protecting prime agricultural areas and the agri-food network. The County of Simcoe official plan designates the lands agricultural, and they are defined as a prime ag area. County official plan, again, permits agricultural uses, and the zoning is reverting back to this, so it would conform to all of the policies of the county plan. And finally, with respect to the town official plan, the lands are designated agricultural area on Schedule B of the town official plan, which with a small hazard land overlay in the southeast corner due to a water course in that location. Section 18.3.2 of the official plan states agricultural uses and one single attached residence as an accessory use to an existing farm operation are permitted uses within an agricultural area designation. So this proposal would permit the existing agricultural use to continue. The existing farm dwelling would remain as an accessory use, and accessory second dwelling would be permitted. So therefore, the zoning bylaw amendment would meet the policies of the town official plan. This is the existing zoning which was approved in 2017. You can see there's a 0.5 hectare area, which is the dark orange area there, zone residential rural, or RR, and this is where the existing dwelling is located. The rest of the lands are zone AG 30, which allows farming but does not permit another dwelling. Again, it's a requirement of the province where severance of a dwelling onto a separate residential lot is occurring as a result of a farm consolidation, that the balance of the farmland prohibit any new dwellings. And again, this is basically to prevent a potential loophole of merging a farm and then severing dwellings over and over repeatedly to continue to create new residential lots within a prime agricultural area every time there's a farm merger. So this is the proposed amendment map schedule, which would zone the entire property back to an AG zone. The RR zone and the AG 30 zone would both revert back to an AG zone as shown in this map, so the whole property would become just simply AG. In terms of additional considerations, there are several examples to sever farmhouses from the balance of farms and then merging farms throughout Innisfil. Staff are of the opinion that the zoning application should happen first before the severance, because this allows council to be the first to hear the proposal rather than the Committee of Adjustment. And this allows a bigger public consultation process because rezonings have 120-meter circulation, where severances only have a 60-meter circulation. Staff don't recommend a change to this process at this time. If there are future issues, we will consider changing the process, but this is the first time that lapse severance conditions have occurred, and the applicant no longer wishes to proceed with the proposal to sever the lands, and yet the lands have been rezoned for this purpose based on the prior application to rezone. So in terms of comments, none have been received, and staff recommend council approve this amendment this evening. If there are no objections from the council or public, alternatively, if there are concerns, staff will consider comments and report back with a revised recommendation at a subsequent council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Is there anyone here this evening to speak on behalf of the applicant? Any of the Spataros? No? All right. We'll now hear from those who have questions regarding the proposed applications. We'll hear first from the public and then from council. I would ask that each person addressing council please come forward and use the microphone and state your name for the record. Is there anybody who has a question or needs clarification or has a comment regarding this proposal? I will ask one more time. Is there anyone here who would have a question regarding this proposal or a comment? Is there any questions from council? Seeing none, if you have not made oral or written submissions in regards to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss your appeal. So if no concerns regarding the proposed amendment to the zoning's bylaw number 080-13 are heard this evening, which we have none, please be advised that this application will be considered by council this evening under section 4.7 of the special council agenda. Council thanks everyone for their participation. Council will now consider the recommendation for the item 4.7 on the agenda. I'm seeing a hand, sir. So if you could just come up to the microphone, sir, and state your name for the record. It's slightly out of order because we'd already asked, but please, I know it's a new process for most people here, so if you have a question, please feel free.
Thank you. My name is Yanni Pagonis. I'm here on behalf of Gianpietro Fagione. I work in real estate, and we've just been curious to see some of the recent proposals regarding some of the engineering assessments, as well as the considerations for the area, as you have mentioned, with respect to preserving the land or any developments that happen in pace with some of the needs of the local community. So I wanted to just clarify for myself, and so that I can communicate it effectively to my client, how this proposed zoning amendment may adversely impact any future applications or any different types of considerations for the use of the land with respect to both the agricultural alongside if the land were to be redeveloped for commercial or for residential purposes, if this precedent would have an adverse impact for other landholders in the area.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, would this application have adverse impact to any potential applications in the future?
Through your worship, the rezoning application simply reverts the lands to the original AG zone. Much of the lands in the area are AG, and so it's not anticipated that this would have any additional adverse impact in the context of the official plan policies, which call this area prime agricultural area, relative to the adjacent properties or the other properties in the area that also have an AG zone.
Thank you, sir. And if you had a question about another piece of property that isn't before us this evening, you could certainly contact the planning department to get more specific information about a specific piece of property that we're not considering tonight.
Oh, thank you. Just one further question. You had mentioned that the amalgamation or the removal of a severance or assembly of the land had been used in the past with respect to subdividing several times. Can you just elaborate a little further on how this would preserve that not happening, or sorry, would preserve the tendency of that not to occur moving forward?
Through you, oh, sorry. Through you, your worship, the proposal, if somebody wanted to come along and sever the house again, it could occur again. The point that I was getting at is the province requires that the balance of the farmland, if a house is severed, needs to be merged with another farm, and the balance of the farmland also needs to be rezoned to prohibit an additional house, so that that would stop the potential of another severance, which the province is seeking to avoid in prime agricultural areas.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
So the question now is that the recommendation is in front of us, and seeing that we had question but no objection, the recommendation is to move forward with the application or with the zoning bylaw amendment. And do I see a mover, Councillor Ices, and a seconder, Councillor Nicol? Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda tonight, planning public meeting number 2. So our second planning public meeting this evening concerns a proposed amendment to the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw under Section 34 of the Planning Act. The property is municipally known as 7935 Yonge Street in the town of Innisfil. I'll just take a moment and stop there and say that if you're here in regards to the first public meeting, that has now concluded. It's been, the recommendation passed. Thank you. Okay, so now we will hear from the clerk on how the public notice for the public planning meeting number 2 was provided.
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of this public meeting was posted on the property and circulated on May 30th, 2019 to all agencies and landowners within 120 meters of the area affected. The notice was also posted on the town's website on June 5th, 2019.
Thank you. We'll now hear from the clerk. I'm sorry, has any correspondence been received by the clerk's department concerning the proposed amendments?
Yes, we did receive one piece of correspondence from Mr. Gary Driuna, dated June 14th, providing comments and concerns regarding the proposed application.
Thank you, and that's on desk. Everyone has a copy of that correspondence. We'll now hear from Mr. Stephen Montgomery, Senior Planner, who will provide a summary of the planning context of the application.
Okay. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public, the purpose of this meeting is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application for the subject lands which are located in Stroud at 7935 Yonge Street and legally described as Part Lot 16, Concession 10 in the town of Innisfil. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject lands from CN to CN23 to specifically permit an all-terrain vehicle and lawn equipment establishment as a permitted use on the subject lands. The zoning bylaw amendment would also legalize existing non-compliant setbacks and other requirements of the zoning bylaw and establish parking requirements. The current business began operating unaware that the zoning provisions of the CN zone do not explicitly permit their business use. The 2016 aerial photo above shows the location of the subject lands. They are approximately 0.39 hectares in area with about 58.5 meters frontage on Yonge Street and are located at the northeast corner of Sunnybrae Avenue and Yonge Street in Stroud. They were formerly used as a garden center and as a result have 6 buildings, including 5 frame greenhouses, a brick building with a glassed and a brick building with a glassed-in addition. Also, there's a parking and outdoor display area facing Yonge Street. They are surrounded by commercial uses to the north, including a beer store and commercial plaza, single attached dwellings and Sunnybrae Public School to the east, vacant lands to the west zoned for future commercial and residential uses, specifically the Centerville development, as well as single detached dwellings, an Innisfil funeral home, and a Stroud vet clinic, and such uses as a martial arts center, a Montessori school, various commercial uses, single detached dwellings, and a church to the south. So in terms of background, 27 Motorsports and Equipment is a power sports and equipment company with a retail and a servicing component. They sell ATVs, motorcycles, lawn tractors, push mowers, generators, parts and accessories, and sports apparel. According to the application, approximately 70% of the business is retail and about 30% is repair and servicing. The intent of the zoning bylaw amendment is to allow the business to continue to operate. The business began operating on the property unaware that the provisions did not explicitly permit the specific retail and servicing uses of the business. For example, a retail store and a service and repair establishment is a permitted use in the CN zone, but does not permit, for example, a recreational vehicle sales establishment, and it also does not permit a motor vehicle dealership. The CN zone also allows motor vehicle repair garages. However, they were only permitted if they were in existing use prior to the town comprehensive zoning bylaw coming into effect in 2013. So in the opinion of staff, the use of the property most closely aligns to motor vehicle dealership or recreational vehicle sales establishment, and therefore the business is either required to relocate to a commercial highway or commercial business park zone, or the property must be rezoned. So as stated, the subject lands are required to be rezoned to CN23 zone to permit the business. This rezoning would legalize existing non-compliant setbacks and other requirements of the town comprehensive zoning bylaw for existing buildings on site, all of which predate the existing town bylaw, which came into effect in 2013 as stated. The zoning bylaw amendment would also establish parking requirements, and site plan control would be required to make property improvements such as improved landscaping, parking areas, building improvements, and other site improvements. So when considering planning applications, town staff have to consider such documents as the Innisfil strategic plan, provincial policies, and county and town policies. So we'll briefly go over each. When we look at the Innisfil strategic plan, it states as a goal that, quote, the town of Innisfil will collaboratively develop a thriving community that embraces a managed level of growth, actively engages residents, attracts and supports businesses, and promotes economic prosperity. In general, the support for local businesses is consistent with this goal. The strategic plan speaks to the importance of promoting economic development in section 1.3 and the development of community amenities, including shops and services that provide valued and viable local options for the community in section 1.1.4. Again, support for local businesses and support for redevelopment of commercial sites and viable businesses is consistent with the town's strategic plan. The subject lands are within the settlement area boundary of Stroud. The provincial policy statement, or PPS 2014, states that settlement areas, quote, shall be the focus of growth and development, and their vitality and regeneration shall be promoted. It also states that land use patterns in settlement areas shall be based on densities and a mix of land uses that efficiently use land and resources, including infrastructure, and that planning authorities shall identify appropriate locations and opportunities for redevelopment where this can be accommodated, taking into account existing building stock or areas and the availability of suitable existing or planned infrastructure to accommodate projected needs. Section 1.1.3.4 also states appropriate development standards should be promoted which facilitate intensification, redevelopment, and compact form. The proposed development is located in the settlement area of Stroud and is reusing a site that was previously used for a garden center, which has become derelict or underutilized, which is a better use of existing infrastructure. The PPS also states that planning authorities shall promote economic development by providing an appropriate mix and range of employment uses to meet long-term needs, and maintaining a range and choice of suitable sites for employment uses which support a wide range of economic activities, taking into account the needs of existing and future businesses and compatible uses to support livable and resilient communities. Staff consider the proposed use a reasonable reuse of the site on Yonge Street providing a new employment use and contributing to the wide range of economic activities on Stroud if the use is small in scale, site-specific, and catering only to the existing use, and if the site is cleaned up through the site plan process, in particular with respect to its interface with adjacent residential lands and addressing noise and other concerns, then it can be considered compatible. The provincial growth plan identifies Stroud as a settlement area and says that, as stated, and says that development shall be directed to settlement areas and complete communities shall be achieved with diverse mix of land uses, including residential and employment uses and convenient access to local stores, services, and public service facilities. The growth plan also states economic development and competitiveness will be promoted by making more efficient use of existing employment areas and vacant and underutilized employment lands and increasing employment densities, ensuring availability of sufficient land in appropriate locations for a variety of employment uses to accommodate forecasted employment growth. It also speaks to integrating and aligning land use planning and economic development goals and strategies to retain and attract investment and employment. The proposed amendment would allow the existing business to continue to operate on what has been a vacant, underutilized site, which supports the growth plan policy of complete communities' reuse of vacant or underutilized employment lands, increasing employment densities, and retaining and attracting investment and employment. With respect to the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, or LSPP, the lands are within a settlement area, and the settlement area policies the LSPP apply. Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority reviewed the zoning bylaw amendment, and in terms of the amendment, has no objection to the proposal under the provisions of the LSPP. And lastly, with respect to the County of Simcoe official plan, the lands are settlement designated in the county official plan, which states, the county official plan states population, employment growth, and development are to be focused in settlements, and development is to occur in a compact urban form that promotes efficient use of land, provision of water, sewer, transportation, and other services. The county OP states that settlement areas shall be the focus of employment growth, and regeneration shall be promoted, and residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, recreational land uses shall be developed within settlement areas on lands appropriately designated in local official plans for the land use. The subject lands are designated downtown commercial area in the town official plan, which is intended to provide the broadest range of retail uses. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is considered to meet these policies of the County of Simcoe official plan, and staff would also note that County Road 4, or Yonge Street, is a primary arterial road with a 45-meter basic right-of-way requirement, which is in Table 5.4 of the County official plan. So as a result, the county has requested a 7.5-meter widening off the front of the subject lands, which will be discussed in the applicant's discussion of the site plan. With respect to the town's official plan, as mentioned, the subject lands are designated downtown commercial area, which allows the broadest range of retail uses as per 2.2. It would also permit uses such as residential apartments, mixed use services, medical offices, government, businesses, and professional offices, entertainment, hotels, among other uses. Car washes, gas bars, and service stations are prohibited in this designation. Section 11.1 of the town official plan speaks to commercial design and placemaking, site improvements such as additional landscape screening, a sidewalk connection, rearrangement of parking, addition of a loading space in a proper location, and building improvements would occur through the site plan process moving forward to improve the site in accordance with this section of the official plan. With respect to existing zoning of the property, as previously stated, the CN zone permits retail store and service and repair establishment, but not motor vehicle dealership or recreational vehicle sales establishment. These uses are permitted in the commercial highway or CH zone and also the commercial business park or CBP zone. CN also, however, permits hotel, motel, restaurant, including takeout restaurant, professional office, medical office, shopping center, taxi stand, veterinary clinic, and other commercial uses in that section. The proposed zoning, which would be called a CN23 zone, would allow a very specific new definition of all-terrain vehicle and lawn equipment establishment. Specifically, this definition means premises used for the display, sale, repair, and storage of all-terrain vehicles, ATVs, including utility terrain vehicles, UTVs, e-bikes, dirt bikes, wheelchairs and scooters, and further including snowmobiles and motorcycles, and lawn equipment consisting of lawn tractors, mowers, saws, and log splitters, and parts and accessories, but shall not include a motor vehicle dealership or recreational vehicle sales establishment as defined herein. The CN's 23 zone would provide a minimum parking standard for the use, which would legalize setbacks of existing buildings on site that predate the zoning bylaw. It would provide for minimum landscape open space, specify maximum area that could occur for retail and indoor and outdoor display of retail goods. It would state that repair uses must occur in wholly enclosed buildings. It would lay out requirements for landscaping strips and also the loading space requirements. Again, the full details, including the site plan, will be provided in the applicant's presentation. With respect to comments, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority has no objections to rezoning. There were no other agency comments. An open house was held at the Town Hall on June 13th, and there were concerns from the abutting property owner to the immediate east who provided an email to the town respecting concerns about noise, environmental runoff, hours of operation, loading and unloading, on-site storage, the drainage ditch along the mutual property line, and how bylaw infringements will be addressed. Staff note a site plan agreement is required under the CN zone. So a site plan agreement would have to be entered into with the owner and registered on title. With respect to the correspondence received, staff have spoken with the abutting landowner and we will provide the following comments. First, with respect to the land use, while the proposal is a motor vehicle dealership by definition, staff are proposing to curtail the use to a specific new definition, only allowing an all-terrain vehicle and lawn equipment establishment. That way, a used car dealership, auto dealership, or other uses such as RV sales do not take place on the property, which staff were concerned might happen if a blanket rezoning to, quote, motor vehicle dealership or, quote, RV sales establishment was proposed. With respect to noise, staff acknowledged noise concerns under the town noise bylaw and will review the requirements for additional fencing and other noise protections through the site plan process. It's agreed that any land use adjacent to sensitive land uses such as residential homes and amenity spaces must have regard for low decibel requirements in these areas. Staff note the zoning bylaw amendment also requires repairs to be confined to wholly enclosed buildings, which would reduce some of the potential noise. Staff will also look at issues respecting hours of business and as well as loading and unloading locations through the site plan process. With respect to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, staff note the subject lands themselves are not inside of the wellhead protection area as per the South Georgian Bay Lake Simcoe source water protection mapping in the town's official plan. However, for example, portions of the Sunnybury Public School and some residential properties to the east within about 150 meters are within the 25-year time travel zone. So the MOE will be circulated on the site plan for comments. And as mentioned, with respect to section 3.41 of the zoning bylaw, staff agree in accordance with the section that storage and use of hazardous chemicals must be contained in an enclosed building, which again would have to be reviewed and met through the site plan agreement. Specifically with respect to loading and unloading, staff agree the loading area should be coming off of Yonge Street to minimize residential conflicts, and this will be addressed through the site plan. The town zoning bylaw does not permit a loading area within 6 meters of a residential zone, and the proposed amendment is not seeking an exemption to this. The zoning bylaw amendment proposed instead to allow a loading space to locate in front of the principal building, which would located off of Yonge Street, and the applicant, again, will be providing more details about the proposed site plan. We'll be asking for asphalt paving for parking, driveway, loading spaces, and aisles. And with respect to storage, staff note the RV on the property that's stored on the property currently is not a permitted use and is required to be removed. Outside storage is not permitted on the front, exterior, or interior side yard of this property on the zoning bylaw, but only in the rear yard, which is the yard facing the beer store to the north, which is very constrained by buildings and therefore not a foreseeable option for outside storage. The site plan would require adherence to these requirements. Further, staff note that any outdoor display areas of products would have to meet the requirements for surface treatment and be appropriately drained. And lastly, the state of the existing mutual ditch, the flows to the ditch, and any spill containment will be reviewed through this site plan process, which is circulated to the MOE and town staff, including town engineering staff. So in summary, staff are of the opinion that through the site plan agreement that's registered on title, concerns respecting the proposed land use could be addressed and enforced, and we were open to discuss these matters further. So staff recommend that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment this evening. If there are no objections from council or the public, alternatively, if there are concerns, staff will consider comments and report back to council with a revised recommendation at a subsequent council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. We'll now hear from Ms. Taylor Pratt-Defoe, planner from Jones Consulting Group Limited, representing the applicant, who will provide further details on the application. Welcome, and I would ask that you cover items that Mr. Montgomery has missed, if that's appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Taylor Pratt-Defoe from the Jones Consulting Group. I'm here on behalf of our client with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment application for the lands at 7935 Yonge Street, which currently contain 27 motorsports and equipment. So the site formerly contained the Springview Garden Center, and 27 motorsports and equipment began operating in early 2019, selling and repairing all-terrain vehicles, motorcycles, and lawn equipment, but specifically excluding the sale and repair of automobiles and RVs. And I will note that the RV on the property was removed in recent weeks. The business is operating within the existing structures on the property, which predate the current zoning bylaw and its requirements, as noted by Stephen. A zoning bylaw amendment is requested to rezone the land's commercial neighborhood exception CN-23. As noted, the application seeks to permit the use of the existing business, specify parking requirements, legalize the existing building setbacks, and other requirements of the zoning bylaw, such as lot coverage for accessory structures and landscaping. So the site is 3.92 hectares in size, with about 60 meters of frontage on Yonge Street and about 50 meters of frontage on Sunnybury Avenue. As noted, the property does contain existing structures which formerly contained the garden center, including a brick building, glassed-in addition, which are considered the primary structure on the property, as well as the existing accessory structures, which were formerly used as greenhouses for the garden center. So the table on the bottom right-hand side shows the existing setbacks that we showed on the existing site layout plan. I will note that the setbacks outlined in red were requested as exceptions as part of this zoning bylaw amendment application. However, based on a survey received today, there are a couple revisions required to the bylaw being proposed, specifically related to these setbacks. The first change I will note is in regards to the minimum front yard setback of 2.3 meters outlined in red. This should be revised to reflect a setback distance of 2.1 meters, in contrast to the 2.3 meters shown in that table. Secondly, the second revision required is to the interior side yard setback, noted there as 2.7 meters, whereas in fact the setback for the existing structure is 2.5 meters. And in addition to this, there is an exception requested related to the landscape strip abutting the residential zone to the eastern side of the property, and an exception requested to permit the 3-meter landscape strip be 2.7 meters adjacent to the existing structure number 1. So this should be revised as well to reflect that this setback is 2.5 meters. So as discussed, given the specific nature of the business that is occurring on the property, and the fact that the motor vehicle dealership or recreational sales vehicle establishment definitions in the zoning bylaw do not specifically capture this use, we have proposed a new land use definition for an all-terrain vehicle and lawn equipment establishment to permit the display, sale, repair, and storage of all-terrain vehicles, including utility terrain vehicles, e-bikes, dirt bikes, wheelchairs, scooters, snowmobiles, motorcycles, and lawn equipment such as lawn tractors, mowers, saws, and log splitters, as well as accessories, but again, not including a motor vehicle dealership or recreational vehicle sales establishment. We are also proposing an associated minimum parking standard for this land use, which would be 1 parking space per 70 square meters of gross floor area. And further to this, we consider this appropriate given that the area dedicated for retail and sales of this business are confined to the principal building rather than all of the buildings currently on the site. Through pre-consultation with the county, it was determined that a 7.5 meter road widening will be required across the frontage of Yonge Street, and this would result in the loss of 2 site entrances, one to the west along Sunnybury Avenue and the entrance to the south along Yonge Street. So the county requires a 10-meter building setback from the new property line. However, the buildings on the site are already existing. The parking can be located within this setback 1.5 meters from the new property line and has been shown in the proposed site layout and parking plan drawing up on the screen right today. So based on the proposed parking standard in the new site area, in consideration of the county road widening, 18 parking spots, including 1 accessible parking space, can be accommodated within the property, with the loading space just to the north of the parking area and just south of the existing principal structure. So a 3-meter landscape strip will be provided abutting the residents to the east, with the exception of a small portion of that landscape strip being 2.5 meters abutting the existing accessory structure to the north. And a landscape strip of 1.5 meters will also be provided along Yonge Street and Sunnybury Avenue, as well as across the daylighting triangle where appropriate. And the property will continue to be serviced by municipal water and a private septic system. With respect to the policy framework for this application, I have reviewed the policies contained in the provincial, county, and township documents. And it is my opinion that the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to a place to grow, the County of Simcoe official plan, and Town of Innisfil official plan for the reasons noted earlier by Stephen. In conclusion, the application relates to lands within a settlement boundary and lands that are designated and zoned for commercial uses. Site improvements related to landscaping, parking, and building improvements will be undertaken and reviewed as well at the time of site plan control, as well as concerns related to noise, hours of operation, and loading and unloading. In my professional opinion, the proposed land use is compatible with the permitted uses in the CN zone as well as the surrounding uses, and the site plan control process will help ensure that no adverse effects do result from an approval if received today. The proposal is consistent with the provincial documents, county documents, and township official plan, and it's my opinion that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment represents good planning and promotes business uptake in an area designated and zoned for such uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pratt-Defoe. We'll now hear from those who have questions regarding the proposed applications. We will hear first from the public and then from council. I would ask that each person addressing council please come forward and use the microphone, and please state your name for the record. Are there any questions or comments from members of the public regarding this application? I'll ask again, is there any questions or concerns regarding this application? Seeing none from the public, are there any questions from council? Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Montgomery. Questions that I have concern about is the noise handling. I think that, you know, it's all about supporting local businesses, but it's about being considerate of neighboring properties. So the equipment, motorcycles, ATV, lawn equipment, snowmobiles are being repaired in there's a brick structure, the rest is greenhouses. Are you aware, do you know if they are being repaired in the greenhouses? Because greenhouses are designed for plants, not for any noise muffling. So that would be my first question, and how the owner is proactively handling the buffering of the noise.
Mr. Montgomery, or did you want the proponent's applicant, or Mr. Montgomery?
Through your worship, under the zoning explicitly of the use provisions of the zone, repair uses have to be conducted in a wholly enclosed building. And through the site plan process, we'd have to make sure that those wholly enclosed buildings and any fencing that's required to reduce noise would cause a reduction in the decibel levels of that function of the business with respect to the adjacent residential uses.
Follow up, go ahead.
Thank you. So just clarification, all the repair of those motors, engines are being handled in that, the brick constructed building? No? They can be done in the greenhouse?
They can be done in any of the structures on the property, but the structures may be required to be better enclosed than they are currently. As you stated, they are simply greenhouses that are quite open on the sides.
Okay. And
they have to be wholly enclosed.
Okay. And are you aware, is there testing of like ATVs and motorcycles, is there testing of any of that equipment? Because you have to sometimes take that out for a drive. Is that going along Sunnybray Avenue, or where is that happening?
Sorry, Ms. Pratt-Defoe.
Thank you. It is my understanding that, unsimilar to a motor vehicle dealership where it's quite often that interested purchasers will come to test drive the vehicles, that is not occurring on the property, and such circumstances are infrequent.
Other questions, Ms. Orsatti?
infrequent,
Setti?
but they do happen? They do. So they're infrequent, but they are happening.
It's my understanding that the test driving of the vehicles is not a common element of the business operation, and the client could speak to that further, to further explain, the frequency of this occurrence on the property.
Ms. Orsatti, or Councillor Orsatti, any other questions? Councillor Payne?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to know from the new owners if they're planning on changing the building, because as far as I'm concerned, if there's motorcycles being in that building, and it's just glass walls, and you're going to be able to hear everything in there. And you've got motorcycles, and we know that some of the motorcycles are very loud, and it's going to be heard all over the neighborhood. So I just want to know if there are going to be improvements made.
Ms. Pratt-Defoe, do we have any information on whether the buildings would be changed?
Through you, Your Worship, it is my understanding that through the site plan control process, there would be requirements from the town to undertake building improvements to ensure that the noise is better enclosed than the noise buffering provided by the existing structures.
Anything else, Councillor? Other questions or comments? Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Worship. Obviously, Mr. Dringa raised some great points, and staff seem to have addressed most of them. Just looking at this, it's currently zoned CV, and looking at the bylaw, that would allow for a gas bar or service station, which could offer fuel as well as car washes. Again, going through the information from the resident and the answers from staff, I have to believe that this would be much less impactful to the community than having a car wash or a gas bar sitting there. So I would like to believe that the proponent would be addressing any noise issues, and that staff will follow up with that. So I don't necessarily, I think this would be much less impactful to the neighborhood than, say, a gas bar or a car wash for sure. That's all.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Ices?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The property that we're talking about is in my ward, and that garden center had been vacant for quite a long time, and I was very excited when I saw a new business come into town. Obviously, we're finding out that it wasn't zoned properly. There are concerns with that being close to residential neighborhoods. It is my understanding that through the site plan agreement that staff will work to alleviate those concerns, and I am excited that property is being used for business that's needed in the town. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I have a question, if I could, Mr. Montgomery. Two, actually. The first one has to do with, you mentioned 25-year time of travel. So the, so it wouldn't be, even if it wouldn't score high enough to require a risk management plan for this property, as far as I understand?
That's correct. There are properties within just over 150 meters, including a portion of the school site that is within that 25-year zone. The subject lands and the immediately adjacent properties are not.
Thank you. However, during site plan, you could introduce things like secondary containment, spill action plan. Thank you. And can I ask if the use conformed with the current zoning, so if a new business moved in there and the use actually conformed, could we require a site plan if they weren't coming to you for a rezone?
To answer your question, Your Worship, the site plan control bylaw applies regardless if there's an active planning application. So if there were buildings and works on the site, that bylaw would apply regardless if it was an as-of-right permitted use.
So even if there was no alterations to any buildings, somebody moved in there and say started another garden center, would we have the opportunity to go and do a site plan?
Through Your Worship, it would depend on the degree of the changes being proposed. So, you know, technically with no changes at all to the site plan would be difficult to apply. In the case where there's road widenings and landscape measures and those matters, we do have the opportunity to apply it in this case.
Thank you. Anyone have any other questions? Councillor Sadi?
I just want to clarify on Councillor Nichols' comments about what would be, you know, gas stations and car washes. Is that under the current commercial neighborhood zone permission? Or is that only when it's being changed to commercial neighborhood exception?
Sorry, Mr. Montgomery.
Through Your Worship, the zone is CN zone. It's not CV, so those uses are not listed under the CN zone. They're not permitted.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing or hearing none. If you have not made oral or written submissions in regard to this proposal before a decision is reached, you should be aware that the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss your appeal. So now it'd be council's decision whether whether they wanted to the application is heard. Be advised that we consider the item under 4.8 for the special council agenda tonight, or whether you would refer it back to staff to be contacted before further consideration. So referring it back to staff to get more information on any questions or items. So I'm going to put forward then to ask council if they want this to be considered under 4.8 of the special council agenda tonight. I'm here seeing nods. Okay, so council thanks everyone for their participation, and council will now consider the item under 4.8. So the recommendation is before you for 4.8, which is the zoning bylaw amendment to go to the special exemption zoning CN-23. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation to get it on the floor? Councillor Van Berkel, Deputy Mayor Davidson. Questions or comments on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation? Oh, sorry, Mr.
Thank you, Worship. My apologies. Was just received an email from Mr. Kane about capturing the changes to the table in the bylaw. Whether you want to, we may want to specify in this resolution that the table be changed. And just to confirm with Mr. Kane, he's nodding there.
Okay.
We could put
Thank you, Mr. Parkin. Duly noted. So the amendments as considered in the table should be included in this recommendation. Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, just to clarify, due to the late nature of the requested change, I did email Mr. Parkin, I'm embarrassed to say, because he's 20 feet away, that we do need to amend that motion just to reflect those numbers that we heard tonight. Staff are supportive of those numbers because those buildings are reflecting an existing condition, so they are what they are in a way, unless we want them demolished, which I don't think is the intent of anyone here. So there's some minor adjustments to the minimum front yard setback that we heard tonight of I'm going to say 2.1 meters to give us 4 centimeters of wiggle room, and to the minimum interior side yard setback of 2.5 meters to give us 9 centimeters of wiggle room if that changes. But that would encapture the results of the survey that we heard from about tonight.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kane. Mr. Parkin?
Through you, Your Worship, I would also just like to note an amendment is required to the exception requested related to the landscape strip abutting the residential zone. So an exception is requested to permit it to be 2.7 meters adjacent to that one existing accessory structure, whereas the setback is actually 2.5, as noted by Mr. Kane. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I recall the diagram, that was at the far northern point of the applicant's property. Questions or comments? Councillor Asadi.
Yes, I have one. Thank you, Your Worship. I guess Mr. Montgomery or Mr. Kane, the thing that I have a problem with is noise so close to residential houses. I mean, I think it's a needed business and everything else. How would we address that if that's a problem? If this is passed, what proactive measures could happen? Before I vote on this, I'd just like to know the direction.
Mr. Montgomery.
Through your worship, as stated, there's a few different measures. You can upgrade the fencing. You could require acoustical fencing along the rear. You could upgrade the buildings and require them to be wholly enclosed, upgrade the walls of the greenhouses to make them, to do a noise study to confirm that the noise is reduced. And of course, the zoning requires all repairs to occur inside of a wholly enclosed building, for example.
So that could come back later if there was concerns in the future.
Yes, through the site plan control process, we would try to address the concerns of the neighboring residents.
Thank you. And I just also wanted to, this is currently commercial property, not residential property being converted to commercial property. So I would ask if there's any other questions or comments regarding the recommendation. Seeing none. Did I get a mover and a seconder? I think I did. Okay. All those in favor of the recommendation as on the printed? All those opposed? One opposed, that's carried. Next is the confirming bylaw, and I'd ask for a mover and a seconder to confirm the bylaw for tonight's proceedings. Deputy Mayor Davidson, Councillor Fowler, all those in favor? That's carried. And adjournment. Adjournment at 7:58. Councillor Nickel, Councillor Payne, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everybody, for being here this evening, and thank you, staff. And we will see you next week for our last council meeting of June, and then looking forward to a little bit of a break in July. Thank you, council and staff, and the public.